as we get reaction to the story. Thanks very much indeed for making time. This was a story not only about Caster Semenya, but it touched on so many profound human rights issues. This Chapter 9 institution has been very vocal about where they stand. And I suppose in some ways you must be relieved that this is the final outcome.
Good morning to you and your viewers, and thank you for having us. Yes, we relieved at this outcome. Of course, it comes after a long time. The background to this case is that it started in 2019 when the World Athletics body issued regulations that were discriminatory against people with naturally occurring testosterone. So it's been a long journey for Caster Semenya. It's been a long journey for individuals in her case. And as you know, Caster Semenya has not been able to exercise her freedom of trade, and she's not competed in a long, long time.
Right. And help us, I suppose, understand, I'll start off by just being honest. I haven't really caught sight of the final judgment myself. And I wonder if you have, because I'm hoping to gauge a sense of whether or not you feel that this court has gone far enough in addressing some of these issues that ultimately came to the fore during the duration of this case.
Yes, what we do have now is a summary of the decision. The court will issue the full judgment later this afternoon. But the court was very clear that Switzerland has violated her rights, Caster Semenya's right. Switzerland failed to exercise enough judicial review over the Court of Arbitration in Switzerland. And by failing to do so, they violated her right under the European Convention on Human Rights. So that's a victory. Caster Semenya took on not only the powerful World Athletics body, she took on Switzerland and other countries that also stood with Switzerland in this case, and she has come out victorious. It's not only a victory for her, it's a victory for all sports people, because it affirms that sports people are ultimately human beings and they cannot be contracted out of their human rights.
Yeah. How precedent-setting do you feel this outcome is? Because it not only touched on those human rights issues which we've been speaking about, but also about the concept of fairness in sports.
It does. The court was very clear that, look, it is true that the sports body is a private actor, that Caster Semenya is a private actor, and that they entered into a voluntary relationship, a contractual, relationship. However, the court was very clear that there is a structural imbalance between this powerful athletic body and this athlete. So in the first place, it is very, very clear that it sets a precedent that although sports people enter into these relationships voluntarily, human rights still apply to them, and that it's up to the courts to exercise jurisdiction over those individuals. Number two, it is such a precedent that when sports bodies, give out their regulations, those regulations should be in line with human rights. In this case, the regulations that were outlined by the World Athletics requiring some females to take medication to lower their testosterone, medication that has not proven that it will be effective, medication whose side effects are not clear, it's very clear that they need to be very, very sure that they are not discriminating human rights. So the courts have made it very clear, the highest court in Europe has made it very clear that sports regulations do not have a carte blanche, but that they must exercise their powers with respect to human rights.
The debate around whether or not these courtrooms or these sports bodies are also allowed to interfere with someone's private life has also been raging as we watch this case really drag on. I mean, we have seen Caster Semenya being subjected to all manner of public scrutiny about her own bodily autonomy, her biology. Even in the court of public opinion, there were all manner of comments being made by radio DJs, I remember, who had latched on to the story. Where do you reckon that leaves the discussion around just how intrusive some of these bodies can be in the name of fairness and things like that.
Yes, no, you are quite right. This is the reason why the South African Human Rights Commission intervened in this case. We intervened not only to stand in solidarity with Semenya against these powerful actors, to not only stand against this discrimination that is very intersectional. It has to do with race, it has to do with gender, it has to do with sex characteristics, but we know it also has to do with the power imbalance between the global south and the global north. So there's an element of racism here, to be very clear. But you are quite right that Semenya, all her life, she has suffered under horrendous treatment, subjected to sex testing, so-called sex testing, subjected to innuendos, discriminated on the field, people refusing to shake her hands and so forth. And you're quite right that in South Africa, we've had senior politicians, radio personalities making remarks that are not only ignorant, but that are very discriminatory. So we are hoping that this case is pedagogical. It is a lesson to all of us to respect the rights of all human beings, respect how everyone has been born, their naturally occurring biology that must be respected. That in this case, Semenya did not cheat, she did not take any performance-enhancing drugs, and that she really wanted to compete in the sport that she excels in.
Sure. Around individuals who are intersex or, persons with gender diverse biological makeup, because I do think even for progressive minds in the public domain, there just isn't enough discussion about, at the very least, understanding the humanity of these individuals before we speak about their integration in different aspects of life, including sports.
You are 100% correct. In fact, at the South African Human Rights Commission, we will be releasing this month a pamphlet and a poster called A Guide for Parents and Guardians of Intersex Children, which is a pamphlet that seeks to guide parents whose children are born in with intersex characteristic. So at number one, they understand what is intersex. Number two, they don't, consent to medical procedure that they do not understand that will have lifelong consequences. But number three, we are in court in a number of cases where there's been discrimination against intersex people, where, in the field of education, in the workplace, there's been a lot of discrimination. But you're quite right also to say that there's been a lot of ignorant and a very, discriminatory language that we use in media, on social media as well, where people are ignorant about the condition of some people. So you're quite right that we are hoping that this case, especially in the context where there's a global right-wing turn, you'll have seen what happened in the United States of America, but also elsewhere in Africa, where there's been a backlash against transgender people, against intersex people. We are hoping that this case, this judgment by the Grand Chamber of the European Court of Human Rights will resonate and will vibrate all over the world, not only the United States, where we have seen a lot of right-wing ideologies with regard to gender, but that in South Africa and also the rest of the continent, people will educate themselves on this condition.
Absolutely. So many important and profound issues that come to the fore in this landmark case. Tshepo Madlingozi, thanks very much indeed for giving us your take. Tshepo Madlingozi is a commissioner with the South African Human Rights Commission.